are these people?
And I am so happy because I have Sabrina Salvati, or as she's known, Sabby Sabs, with me today. Hi, Sabby.
Hi, Tara.
I feel like doing the doobie-doo because I love your theme song, and we both got theme songs from Jessie Jett.
Yeah, I know. Jessie's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Really great. So you've been doing some really great coverage of all the craziness that's in our world right now and the stuff that they are trying to get us to accept right now from the US government. And it's amazing. It's amazing. I actually just wanted to get your view on something, and Reade, I think you had it, but I was trying to share, of course, that you were going to be on the show. So I was trying to share that with everyone. And then on Twitter, and then I shared the Russian President Putin's speech today about, why they're having their military operation, their conflict in Ukraine, and his views on this. And you think that the world would want to know, but I immediately got shadow banned, and you can't really see the tweets. So we're going to have his little speech on the show, and I was hoping you could watch it with me, and then we could talk about it right after, if that's cool.
All right, let's do it.
Вы сражаетесь за наших людей на Донбассе, за безопасность нашей Родины, России. Россия всегда выступала за создание системы равной и неделимой безопасности. Системы, которая жизненно необходима всему мировому сообществу. В декабре прошлого года мы предложили заключить договор о гарантиях безопасности. Россия призывала Запад к честному диалогу, к поиску разумных, компромиссных решений к учету интересов друг друга. Все напрасно. Страны НАТО не захотели нас услышать. А это значит, что на самом деле у них были совершенно другие планы. И мы это видели. В открытую шла подготовка к очередной карательной операции на Донбассе, к вторжению на наши исторические земли, включая Крым. В Киеве заявляли о возможном приобретении ядерного оружия. Блок НАТО начал активное военное освоение прилегающих к нам территорий. Таким образом, планомерно создавалась абсолютно неприемлемая для нас угроза. Причем непосредственно у наших границ. Россия дала упреждающий отпор агрессии. Это было вынужденное, своевременное и единственно правильное решение. Решение суверенной, сильной, самостоятельной страны. Соединенные Штаты Америки, особенно после распада Советского Союза, заговорили о своей исключительности, унижая тем самым не только весь мир, но и своих сателлитов, которым приходится делать вид, что они ничего не замечают, и покорно все это проглатывать. Но мы другая страна. У России другой характер. Мы никогда не откажемся от любви к родине, от веры и традиционных ценностей, от обычаев предков, от уважения ко всем народам и культурам. А на Западе эти тысячелетние ценности, судя по всему, решили отменить. Такая нравственная деградация стала основой циничных фальсификаций истории Второй мировой. Мы чтим всех воинов союзнических армий, американцев, англичан, французов, участников сопротивления, отважных солдат и партизан Китая, всех, кто разгромил нацизм и милитаризм. Уважаемые товарищи, сегодня ополченцы Донбасса вместе с бойцами армии России сражаются на своей земле. Вы сражаетесь за Родину, за ее будущее, за то, чтобы никто не забыл уроков Второй мировой, чтобы в мире не было места палачам, карателям и нацистам.
Okay. So, that was interesting. And Reade, I heard your sigh. I know that's how everyone feels, right? It's sad that today's Victory Day, celebrated in Europe and in Russia, recognizing the people that fought valiantly against the Nazis in World War II. And so this is a very major holiday for Russia because they lost 27 million people during World War II. So every single person in Russia had a relative that was touched, by the war. And there's been a lot of revisionist history. So Sabby, what did you think hearing what he had to say? What was your kind of initial thoughts?
Interesting. He was denouncing Nazism.
Yeah.
Which I don't hear that much coming from the United States government. I just hear them making a lot of excuses as for why they're giving Ukraine more money. And I just saw a recent post actually before we went live that Joe Biden's going to try to send more weapons to Ukraine.
Are you
So,
serious?
oh yeah, I just saw another post about it.
Oh my goodness. We just gave them 2 days ago 130 million.
Yeah, they really want Ukraine to win. I don't think Ukraine is going to win. I just think at this point they
No.
need to just give up.
No.
But there's already some messages going out from Times Square. I also saw pictures about this as well, where they were advertising like basically to be against this day in Russia.
Oh, but Russia was one of the main reasons why World War II was won, was the Russians. Yeah.
Yep.
And there's been a lot of revisionist history about that. I know I saw a snarky tweet about Germany. They said Germany's mad at Russia again. Yeah, they were, and they lost World War II. But yeah, so what is your thought about, one thing that struck me about this speech was he was saying, about the American exceptionalism. Did you catch that?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, basically what he's kind of alluding to, I think if you remember his speech in 2007, he was talking about how the West was forcing this unipolar world where the world was multipolar as far as economic, growth and things that were going on, meaning China and India and other countries that were developing and becoming, more powerful and viable economically and growing. And the West just won't allow it, just like the way Nord Stream 2 was shut down, right?
Right. Well, the United States government doesn't want another economic competitor,
Right.
period. Like that's why they're trying to shut down China, Russia, anyone that they see as competition for them. They don't want other countries to be able to fend for themselves. They don't want other countries to have their own resources. We steal a lot of resources from other countries. So the idea that the United States government wants to be number one,
Mm-hmm.
and anyone who comes anywhere near close to that, which China is close.
Mm-hmm.
China is very close. And at some point, they're going to pass us.
And they're not imperialistic.
Right. Right. But the United States government, the talking points that they have, they make this seem like that's a bad thing. If we're not number one, then that's bad. Any country that is trying to challenge us in reference to economic power, they are seen as the villain. And the American people buy into it. Every time they buy into the propaganda. It was just like 2 years ago, I started hearing people say, we need to watch out for China. They can't pass us. And I'm like, why? Why do we need to be number one? So I think back on some of the things that I was taught, like when I was growing up in school. Mm-hmm. And there was this idea that America was supposed to be the greatest, the best country in the world. And everybody else who tried to challenge that, we needed to stop them. Right.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've noticed about your show is that you've been very out front about the imperialism, about being anti-war, about, really examining some of the positions. And have you gotten, I've noticed that you've been growing and growing, but have you gotten any pushback for your messaging or any censoring or deplatforming at all? Or have you been able to bypass that so far?
Most of the pushback I get has been on Twitter. Like, to be honest with you, it's usually like on Twitter, sometimes on Facebook, although people don't really read as much when it comes to like imperialism on Facebook. Like people don't, most of the time they don't look at that. But in reference to censorship, some of my videos have been marked as limited instead of like full monetization. I do have one video that was demonetized. But it is what it is. I think I'm a little bit more careful about it. I don't put it in the title. Even when I talked about Black volunteers going to Ukraine and the Peace Corps, the warning that was coming from the Peace Corps, I just put in the title, Peace Corps warns Black volunteers. So I think, there's certain things that the bots like will look for in reference to these videos. The title is a big giveaway, I think. And then also you have to be careful about how you talk about it. So there's ways to talk about it, but like to get your point across, but talking around it in a sense. But then
Being creative,
also,
yeah. Mhm.
also I think it's different too, because I don't talk about it every day. And
Right,
I think, I think that's why they came after Jackson Hinkle, because he talks
right.
about it almost every day.
Mhm.
Larger channels tend to be exempt from this. I've noticed, like, for example, TYT can talk about this and they're fine.
Mhm.
Breaking Points can talk about it. Majority Report can talk about it, but they usually come after the smaller channels in
Right.
reference to censorship.
Yeah, because we'll have less loud voices when we, well, you know, what I like about it too, is you were calling out the racism that's inherently been part of the messaging about this war, about this proxy war that the US is fighting against Russia using Ukraine. So talk a little bit about that, like about just kind of what you've seen as far as the racism that's been blatant and subtle.
I think what a lot of people don't know, and I was talking to my parents about this as well,
Mhm.
is the way that Black people and other people of color are treated in Ukraine. So there were a
Mhm.
group of African students. They were trying to get on the train to get out of Ukraine right before this conflict really took off.
Right.
And the train and the engineers would not let them get on. They would only let white people get on. And
Wow.
it wasn't just like the African students, it was also other students that were from India, and they're
Mhm.
there just to study, like in Ukraine. So
Right.
they were just trying to leave and get back to their home country because they didn't
Mhm.
want to be there when things got worse.
Yeah.
They were told they couldn't get on, and there's several videos online about this as well. Someone
Mhm.
actually had sent that to me. That's how I found out about it, and I did more research about it. And they were talking about just their experiences, their overall experiences, like living there as a student. And what
Mhm.
people may not realize, when you go to Europe, and I lived in Europe,
Mhm.
there is a big difference, I think, from living in Germany and living in Ukraine. It's the
Mhm.
culture is different, the people are different. In Ukraine, they're not used to seeing Black people. Whereas,
Mhm.
like in Germany, they're a little bit more used to it because there's so many military bases over there, right?
Right.
But they're not used to seeing Black people in Ukraine, and their idea of what Black people are like is based on what they see through media
Oh,
and
wow.
on TV and movies.
Mhm.
Same thing for South Korea. My dad lived
Mhm.
in South Korea, and he talked about his experiences there as well. Same thing.
Mhm.
So, because of that, they have this mindset that Black people are like what they see in the movies or what they see in TV. We're all criminals, lazy, those kinds of things. So, they can be really hostile towards you. And what I saw on the Peace Corps website, they were warning Black volunteers, telling them these are the things that you may experience when you go to Ukraine, and
Mhm.
here's how you can handle it. And I went through all those things like on my show, and I was just like, just don't go volunteer there. Like it's not worth it for you to have to
Yeah.
go through all those loopholes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you know, and also I remember when it was first breaking out, I remember the reporters were trying to get people on board with, you know, virtue signaling, the blue and yellow flags, and like, you
Yep.
know, whatever, and galvanizing around the refugee population that was leaving Ukraine. And they were saying things like, oh, well, these are people that look like you and me and have Netflix accounts. Someone
Yep.
said that, and I thought that was just so, it was classist and racist and just stupid, ignorant, but
Right. They
it
were
was a
saying that
journalist.
they were saying they have blonde hair and blue eyes. And
Mhm.
so what I've been trying to do is educate people about these conflicts in other countries where there's people of color that most people don't know about. So most
Yeah,
people I've spoken to don't know about what's going on in Yemen. They don't know about
right.
Somalia. They know a little bit about Afghanistan, but not to the extent that the US put sanctions on people there and people are starving. They don't know that
Yeah,
part.
one
They
million
don't
children are going to be starving in this year. And how many, I mean, in Yemen, you mentioned how many children casualties? It was an astounding number, you know, of
It was
casualties
a
and loss.
lot. I don't remember offhand, but I remember
Yeah.
I was showing people pictures
Mhm.
of what's happening in Yemen because they didn't believe me. They're like, if this is true, why am I not hearing about this on the news? And I said, because Saudi Arabia are the ones who are
Mhm.
attacking them, and the United States government gave Saudi Arabia the weapons to do so.
Yep.
That's why they're not talking about it. So
Yeah.
when I see the blue and yellow flags in people's bios, it takes me back to like, I really hate when people commercialize war.
Right.
And we have a tendency to do that in this country, and not just war, but just tragedy, period. I
Yeah.
remember this happening after 9/11. It was like, how can we make a profit off of what happened? Why are there t-shirts and mugs that they're selling
Right.
about this?
Yeah.
Similar thing to, and more local, but similar thing to the Boston Marathon bombing that happened here. It
Mhm.
was like, for those of us who live here and were there, it's a traumatic event. And
Right.
I appreciate the fact that they were like, Boston strong, we stand with Boston, but then they commercialized it. And
Yeah.
so they were selling t-shirts and mugs. And I'm like, then it was everybody else was strong, New York strong, Charleston
Yeah.
strong. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. It's not, again, that's not very, it's capitalism. I think it's just, we're in end stage capitalism, most people can't get affordable housing, medical care, dental care, vision care, and we can't get access to basic needs. And, it's just terrible. I wanted to ask you a little bit, and then kind of come back to all the geopolitical politics. But I wanted to ask you, because you have your own show, you're an independent content creator now, and you're doing really well. You're just taking off, and as you should, because I love your show and I watch it. But how have you found it being a woman in independent media space? How's it been? Like, are you getting a lot of support and lift? Is it easy to get guests, or has it been a challenge?
Oh dear. Here come the facts.
Okay, cool. Bring it.
It has been incredibly difficult.
Okay.
And I can say this as I do have people to compare it to, because I'm a part of RBN. So I'm on two different platforms here. One of the things I've noticed is that people tend to be reluctant to talk to women in the space. It's a big one. It's not just me.
I agree.
They're more reluctant to talk to women, and particularly, it's the weirdest thing. Like, for example, I will invite someone, whether it's for my show or for RBN, and some people will not respond to me, but then one of the men from RBN will send the same message and they'll respond to the men. And some of them will only respond to the men. That
Wow.
happens often, actually. So that's one of the things that I've had to deal with, like running into. Another thing I've noticed too is that, and this is why I think, I don't know, I like news and doing news and interviews. But I think for me, like I majored in broadcast journalism in English, so I know how to do this. But I think for me, interviews in the beginning is how I started out my show, interviewing people. I think if you just do interviews, then you run into the problem of eventually you run out of people like to interview. So then you're going to bring up the same people, and that's totally fine. But eventually it gets to the point where people want to see something different. And so in the beginning, I started out just doing interviews, and I got that feedback from people like, would it be, implement some different things? And so I was like, well, I've done the news before, so I'll just do news as well. And I actually do more of that now than interviews, but it's very difficult. There's a lot of gatekeepers. So there's people that I've noticed, like, for example, I can't get access to, because in order to get access to them, you have to go through someone else who can vouch for you. And what that means to people watching is that not everybody has their contact information public, like I do. So people know how to reach me.
Right.
Not everyone does. So if they don't have contact information that's public, a lot of times what you have to do is you have to go through someone else that knows them or that has interviewed them, and they have to contact that person and say, you should go on this person's show. Other than that, there's no way, you have no way of getting them. And that's unfortunate, but that's why it's called access journalism. There's certain people that will prevent you from getting access to other people in this space.
That's so interesting. And yeah, I've run into that a bit myself, but part of, you know, my challenge is that it's about who I am, and it's the Biden factor, I call it. Because, you know, people see me as the person that came forward about Biden, but they forget that I'm a person in the world that actually worked for a long time in geopolitics, and that's my space, and I'm a writer and I'm interested. And so of course, you know, content creation is part of it. But like you said, it is hard. Like there's certain people I want to interview and I can't, you know, you can't reach them directly. So it's interesting. And then, you know, like I reached out, I wanted some balance, and I was curious, there was this intelligence person I wanted to interview along with someone else to give, you know, a little challenge, a little debate. And he saw who I was and he just said, I'm going to pass, Tara, you know, like kind of sanctimonious, like, yeah, because of who I am and because he's a Biden bro or whatever. But like, it's so silly, because I think what people really value is they want to hear people with different views and, you know, different perspectives. Like you just gave a perspective, you know, from Boston that's really interesting. Like I didn't know that about, you know, to be honest with you, I thought the Boston Strong, I didn't know that started with Boston. I thought that started with New York. So I didn't, you know, that's how lost it got in the whole narrative. But I think my point is that it's really important we listen to each other's, you know, views and hear different perspectives so that we can grow and we can learn. Otherwise, we're given this one-sided lens through Western eyes of how everything has to be, instead of a more international and varied look, you know?